Well, welcome to another episode of Women in Politics Independence Day. I'm Jaynie Morris, your host, and this episode is a little bit different because my very special guest isn't actually running in the upcoming election in Australia in May 2022. However, the reason that I have invited her on this podcast series is that her background and what she did in changing and igniting a movement back in March 2021 has a significant uh, impact's probably not the right word. She's better with words than I am, but it has a significant contribution to where potentially the election results are going to go. Janine Hendry is a feminist, mother, academic, social enterprise entrepreneur. She has a list as long as your arms of all of her major successes in life. I had the great fortune of meeting this woman by default back at the beginning of 2021 when she put up a little message inviting some people to come to Canberra and create a circle and start getting some action and attention in Canberra for women. I'm going to let her tell you all about that. She is the founder and incredible woman for March for Justice, hashtag Enough is Enough. Janine Hendry, welcome to Women in Politics.
Thank you, Jaynie. Really nice to see you again. And, you know, one of these days we are going to get to meet face to face.
Absolutely. And I was speaking to Kathy Lett the other day, and we were actually talking about what you started last year. And she said to me, wouldn't it be great if we got all of us together over in London and started swinging from chandeliers, drinking champagne and talking about the women's movement? So I must share that with you.
I think that sounds perfect.
I do too. I had to share that.
Sounds wonderful.
Now, Janine, so would you mind just for the audience, because many of our audience may well be familiar with you through my sister company, Sheroes Unlimited, because of course we did feature you in our Sheroes Unlimited magazine last year. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself, what led up to March 2021, and then we can take it from there?
Sure. So your audience do know about the March for Justice last year, and the March for Justice really emerged, I think, out of sheer frustration as to what was happening in Australia, particularly in the political sphere. And I can really only talk about my own experience. And that was that for months and months, I'd sat watching the media. And I guess looking at what was happening by really our leaders, our highest lawmakers in the land. And I wasn't liking what I was seeing. So at the time, to recap, we had the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, and his senior ministerial team treating an alleged sexual assault in Parliament House, the People's House, treating that as a political issue. We had Christian Porter facing historic rape allegations, and that had come on the back of our Deputy Prime Minister having a relationship with a staffer and then actually denying paternity of his son. And I was looking at these incidents and looking at my then 16-year-old son and thinking, these are his role models. And in a couple of years' time, I'm going to launch my kid out into the world. And his role models are people who are demonstrating zero respect for women in this country, zero respect. And I was watching this playing out in actually the metrics. What I was seeing was on a global basis, gender equality in Australia was declining. And then I'm looking at, what is happening with our highest lawmakers, and I'm thinking, this is not right. This is not right. And let me quote something for you, which I think really puts all this into perspective, Jaynie. So, a girl born in Cambodia, Laos, Zimbabwe, Montenegro, Georgia, today has a greater chance of achieving equality than a girl born in Australia. Now, that's despite the fact that we in Australia have the 13th highest income in the world. Now, think about that and think about the significance of that, particularly for women, but also for men. And then you start looking at the behaviours of our most senior politicians. And I think that rightly so, we need to be saying, what is going on here? What is going on? So March for Justice came about because I, for one, was really, really angry. And what I determined was there was a lot of other women out there who were equally as angry as me. And you know what? I'm still angry 12 months down the track. I'm still furious.
I was when you made that announcement last year and put that invitation out. It was the first rally that I have ever attended in my life. As a woman over 50, I actually realised that that probably wasn't a good thing. Uh, that I hadn't done it until then. But then again, I was very honoured to be a part of your team in my part of the world too, from a media perspective as well. However, I agree with you. What I saw at the rally, not just in my local community, but also from Australia wide, the thousands and thousands of women and men that came out in support of that particular cause on that particular day. However, Janine, I have to ask you this because you're on the front line of all of this. This happened 12 months ago.
Mm.
What's happened since?
I mean, it's a really great question, and I've been watching and looking, observing and talking, and we did, to give the government their credit, they did hold the Women's Safety Summit. But and it was postponed, and difficult times. We were in, most of the country was in lockdown. But, I note that the initiatives that did come directly out of the March for Justice, one being the Women's Safety Summit, our Prime Minister himself decided he would do the keynote address. And I couldn't help but think, why is he not listening to women? Because that is what we have asked for him and his leadership team and his cabinet to do all along. And I think in that one move, he really demonstrated that he wasn't prepared to listen for women, let alone that the survivor advocates that have been talking about this, Brittany Higgins and Grace Tame, were not invited to this summit. So yes, we had a summit. I don't think it got off to a very good start. And the report or the findings that came out of that summit are, dare I say it, pretty lofty. And when we look at particularly women's safety, not a lot has changed over the last decade, despite the money that's been put into that. So you kind of think something's got to give. So, we've had the Women's Safety Summit. We're yet to see what actually happens from that. We've had the Prime Minister for Women appointed. our government has certainly wheeled out each of their senior women. But in terms of changes on the ground, making women's lives better, we've seen nothing. Did the budget? We've had 2 budgets presented since the last budget, and you can't, since, sorry, the March for Justice. You know, there's an awful lot of roads and infrastructure development in those budgets, and not a lot specifically for women. And I think it's a great shame. It's a really great shame. You know, the budgets were certainly pink-washed, but when you peeled back the layers, there wasn't much there.
If you look from a political standpoint, would you agree that the March for Justice event and forward movement of that should have been a great opportunity for any party of any political persuasion to actually grab a hold of and level up if I put it to the base level, I mean, certainly to secure in the female vote.
Correct. And we're really not seeing a lot. I mean, even in this election period, we're of course comparing the Liberal Party record with the Labor Party promises. We've got to recognise, you know, the Labor Party haven't been in power. So all we can do is look forward and look at their promises. And, you know, yes, they're talking about childcare, but childcare is not a women's issue. It's an economic issue. So it is a little bit frustrating when that keeps getting thrown into the mix as well. Look at what we're doing for women. You know, the only thing I can say is when we, you know, compare our 2 major parties, the Labor Party, because of quotas, has a really good gender representation. And I see that as incredibly positive, because until women get a seat at the table, really nothing much is going to, it's not going to change. And the evidence of that, I think, comes out in the policy that the Liberal Party policy that we've seen over the last 8 years. It's not meeting the realities of women's needs.
Why do you think that again, since March last year, why do you think that the cause and the voices of women have not been heard, have not been listened to in Canberra?
It's a really great question, and I don't know. I don't really have the answer, because it's not like we haven't been shouting on a daily basis. So it is not clear to me why the current government isn't listening to women. And what we're seeing, of course, is the rise of these extraordinary female independents that have emerged as a result, I think, of years and years of inaction. And they're standing up and saying, enough is enough. You know, we've walked through the streets, we've yelled, we've screamed, we've been incredibly polite. We've tried everything, and yet our voices are just being muffled. So my intuition is it is about to change, and I absolutely am convinced that this election, will be determined on the basis of women.
So let's talk about that, because obviously this is the Women in Politics Independence Day podcast, and we have been interviewing so many
Mm,
independent women who are running and campaigning for the May 2022 election. Many of whom have said that they had never thought that they would even step up and
mm,
do anything like this, but now that they're in, and by the way, many of them have also cited the event of March last year
mm,
as being pivotal in their decision making. Looking at the independents that are coming through, and as you say, I mean, we have so many now across Australia who are standing either for the lower house or the Senate as well. History making in politics in Australia, and what if you had a crystal ball? How do you think it's going to go, Janine?
Look, I think it is a really pivotal election, and as you said, and I do think just really observationally looking at social media and looking at what's happening, particularly in the key electorates in my state, in Victoria. So looking at Zoe Daniel in Goldstein and Dr. Monique Ryan in Kooyong, is that I think that there was a certain, is arrogance the right word, Jaynie? But a certain a certain disbelief that these women would actually get any ground. And suddenly, 2 weeks into the election cycle, they're recognising that in fact their seats are actually in jeopardy, because we are so starved, I think, of rational voices, but also of women's voices, because of course we relate to what we can see. And we've known this for a long time, particularly when it comes to diversity, that young men and young women need to see people who look like them in positions of power so that they can aspire to them and aspire to be like that. And with the Liberal government in particular, with their 32% of women, we're not seeing role models, and yet suddenly on our streets we're seeing people who are talking about the things that really matter, who are listening to what it is that we want, not imposing on us what they think we want to hear. And a great example of that is just in the last few days, and the government introducing this package for fishos. What is a fisho, for goodness sakes? Fishos and something else, a language that is so foreign to me. And I'm thinking, aren't you listening? Are you
Mm.
not listening? This is just like, wow, it's got so bad that you think, and the reason is they don't care about us, because we're not the people that are going to vote for them in particular. But yep, I
Are
think this
you
is a pivotal election. Yep.
are you hopeful for the rise of the female independents? Not just in the upcoming election, however, the rise of female independents, even on a local level of government. Are you hopeful for the future, given everything that's been going on in the last 15 months for you, Janine?
Yep. I think it's going to be extraordinary. I think these women are breaking ground like we have never seen before. And once they break through, and they will break through, this election will be determined by women for women. Once they break through, I don't think there's going to be any stopping them. There will be They will have paved the way for so many other women to stand up and recognise that we do have individual power. And that was certainly something that I learned from March for Justice, is that we don't have to have a collective action, that actually one voice can make a difference. It can create change. And certainly when you've got one voice plus one voice plus one voice, then you get a lot of change. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting time politically, and not only in Australia, but certainly around the globe. We're starting to see more and more women stand up and say, had enough.
So what's happening in the future for Janine Hendry then?
Golly gosh, certainly not politics.
Oh, I sort of pose that question sort of in that way.
Yeah, no, I do think it is absolutely critical to have women in politics, because, as you know and I know, the best way to get change is to make change from the inside rather than the outside. But I also recognise that we're still going to need activists. We're still going to need people like me on the outside, ready to hold these people to account. And I think that my role is going to be moving forward about holding these people to account, and that in itself is a really important part of our democratic process.
How can we all what can we all do to facilitate that change and bring about real change as well? Janine, what advice would you give all of us how we can be a part of that?
I think the most important advice is to take a step. And that's actually the hardest thing to do. You know, it's very easy to sit on Twitter and bang out some words about something that you don't like. It's much more difficult to get up, walk out the door and actually do something about it. And in my experience, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be writing a letter. It can be ringing your local member. It can be starting a kitchen table conversation. But it is about having the courage, and I think that's what it is. Maybe it's not courage, maybe it's stupidity, who knows? But it's having and finding that energy to take a step, any step, however small, and sending an email. But social media is great, but move it beyond that and connect with an actual human being and do something.
So, if you had an 8-year-old Janine sitting in front of you right now, what advice, knowing what you know about the future, what advice would you give her?
I think it would be exactly relating to our last conversation, and that is trust your instinct. And I think particularly for women, we grow up in an environment where more often our instinct is ridiculed, and we learn as we get older just to follow a path rather than follow what's really in our heart. So I think I would say to little Janine, trust your instinct and take that step. Be prepared to take that step, because even if you fall down, you're still going to learn something, so that the next time you take the step, maybe you won't fall down.
That's great advice, and not just for 8-year-old Janine, but I think for all of us, most definitely. Janine, if any of our audience would like to get in touch with you, or to find out more, or find out how, how they can just connect or learn more from you, what's the best connection for you?
They can contact me. They can contact me via social media. I'm usually pretty
Yeah.
good at responding, or they can email me at Janine at JanineHendry.com.
Fantastic. And I know that the next 5 weeks in particular, or how long have we got left of the campaign? 4 weeks.
21 days. 21 days, Jaynie. Not that I'm
And who's counting? I tell you what, I like to think, I like to feel that I'm neutral. However, I have been eyeing out some teal dresses lately. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't have much of my wardrobe that's not black. Today being a bit of an exception, but yeah, I'm a little partial to teal now.
I think so. In 21 days, most definitely. Janine, it's been great to have your insight and your contribution into this conversation around women in politics, especially for this history making in politics election that's coming up in May in Australia, 2022. And thank you for everything that you have done by igniting the March for Justice movement as well. Slow burns always lead to, great things. And I dearly believe that that is happening as a direct result of what you do in your life and your world. So thank you. Very honoured to have you on the program today.
Thanks, Jaynie. Lovely to chat.
And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, Women in Politics Independence Day podcast, as much as I am loving bringing these women to you right now, especially in this political climate, then you know what to do. Hit subscribe at jayniemorris.com so you never miss an episode. If you want to catch up on all the other episodes that we've been doing so far, you can just scroll back and go through that as well. All the contact details that Janine just said, they are below wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast right now, so that you can reach out and keep in contact with her. I definitely recommend you follow her on social media. You will learn so much just by doing that little action as well. And remember to share, like, and comment below. Share these podcasts and make sure that we collectively make a positive contribution to change in our communities. I'm Jaynie Morris, and I look forward to having your company next on Women in Politics Independence Day podcast, wherever you are in this amazing, beautiful world of ours. I hope you have an absolutely fabulous day.